Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. I am Caleb, and today I am bringing you a book series ranking video. And today I'm going to be ranking the 7 Chronicles of Narnia books by C.S. Lewis. Now, the Chronicles of Narnia has been a big part of my life since I was a child. I was introduced to this franchise when I was a child, with one of the movies. It was either the animated film from the 1970s, I think, or the live action Disney adaptation that was done in like 2005 or 2006. It was, I think, the first fantasy series I ever read and is very near and dear to my heart. And so this year, since I've been doing a lot more reading in the last 2 years, and I have for quite some time, reading a lot of new series and also revisiting some old books that I have read in the past, I figured I would reread The Chronicles of Narnia. And now that I have finished doing that, I figured I would do a ranking video for you. Before I start the ranking, there are a couple of just little things that I want to say before I actually start. First of all, if you're wondering my thoughts on the publication order versus chronological order thing, the first time I read this series, I just read them in the order that I got the books, which I am pretty sure was mostly publication order. And then every time I reread the series after that, I read in chronological order. However, when I reread them this year, I read them in publication order, and I do personally think that is the way to go. If you like chronological order, that's totally fine, but personally, I think I'm more of a publication order fan. And secondly, I like all of these books, so just because one of them is towards the bottom does not mean that I don't like it. I think all of these books are at least good, if not great. In fact, I would say at least half of the series is great, and the rest is just good. So do keep that in mind. Just because a book is lower on the list does not mean that I don't like it, because I do. And without further ado, let's get started with the rankings. So in last place at number 7, I have chronologically the first Narnia book, which is The Magician's Nephew. Now, again, I do like The Magician's Nephew. There are a lot of things in here that I do enjoy. And also, by the way, I'm going to be basically spoiling all of these books. So if you haven't read them and you want to not be spoiled or whatever, then keep that in mind. But I really enjoyed the stuff on Charn, and the Wood Between Worlds. Those were probably my 2 favorite parts of this book, where Diggory and Polly have these rings that allow them to travel to the Wood Between Worlds, and then one ring does that, and then the other ring brings them into whichever world is in the pool in the Wood Between Worlds. It's full of a bunch of pools that all lead to different worlds, which itself is a concept that I love, and I think that is just super duper cool. It's one of my favorite concepts within the entire Narnia series, actually. I just think it's fascinating. And the first world they go to before Narnia is the world of Charn, which is where Jadis, the White Witch from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, originated from. And I loved learning about Charn, even just a little bit of visual description that is given, and the tiny bit of history. I really enjoyed that, and I wish there was more of it. If you happen to know if there is more of it somewhere, I doubt there is, but if there is, let me know in the comments. I really loved that. Also, I like and dislike at the same time, which I'll get into, how this is basically a prequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It is a prequel to the entire rest of the series, but it is, I think, a more direct prequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because it tells the origins of the White Witch, it tells the origins of Narnia, it tells where, like, the lamppost in Lantern Waste came from, all of this stuff. It explains why Diggory Kirk, who is the professor in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, why he does not doubt the children when they tell him that Narnia may exist. It tells the origins even of the wardrobe in that book. So it's just a big origin story for the entirety, basically, of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which I really like. However, I am not really a fan of it being an origin for Narnia itself. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but knowing when and how Narnia begins and ends, like physically when the world is created, and how and when and how it ends, to me just takes away a little bit of the magic and the wonder of the world of Narnia, which is something that I love about it. It's not a big issue at all. I don't mind it that much. It's just something that I would prefer to not have. But aside from that, I did enjoy this book, especially those couple things that I mentioned earlier. Next one up at number 6, which is kind of funny, the very first chronological book is my least favorite. The next one is the final book, which is The Last Battle. It tells about the end of Narnia, which again, I don't love the idea of, but again, don't mind it too much. But this one, to me, is just like, I enjoy the story of it, but I don't like love it or anything, and that's really the main reason why it's so close to the bottom for me. I certainly enjoyed seeing some of the old characters again at the very end when Narnia ends and basically everyone goes into what I assume is Aslan's country. And it's nice to see all the characters again. You see Tumnus again, you see Prince Caspian again, all these different characters that have been in the series all throughout its history. That was kind of fun. I enjoyed the whole false Aslan thing, which I don't love, but I think it's kind of an interesting idea, and the way that plays into things. I like how the Cowerman culture plays into this book. All that stuff is just one where, you know, I think other books have higher highs than this one. This is the one where I'm just kind of like the most, it's good, and that's pretty much all I have to say about it. There's nothing in here that I really love. There's nothing in here that I really hate or anything. It's just kind of, out of all of them, it's the most kind of meh sort of book, which again, I do still like it, but that's how I feel about it. Next one, at number 5, is one that I wish I could have higher, and in fact that is the case for pretty much all of the books from here on out up until number 1, and that is The Horse and His Boy. I love the idea of this book, and I love the book itself as well, but the idea of this book being basically the closest thing to a spin-off in the series out of all the books, and also this is the only book in the series in which there is not someone from our world traveling to Narnia. This book entirely takes place within Narnia, which I think is neat. And I really enjoyed the characters in this book. The main characters of Shasta, Aravis, and then the 2 horses, Bree, and the other one whose name I can't remember. They're some of my favorite main characters in the series. In fact, I would say they're probably second only to the 4 Pevensey children. And a large part of the reason why I like those ones so much is probably due to nostalgia. So, just on a pure character level, how much I enjoyed reading the characters, these ones are probably my favorite, actually. I also really liked how this went into, like, Cowerman culture and all of that. Learning more about that, that was super interesting. However, there are 2 things that bring this one down for me, and are the reason why, as much as I wish I could have it higher, I decided not to put it higher. Those being the battle at the end. Now, battles at the end of Narnia books are not anything, like, uncommon. It happens in several of them. But the one in this one I didn't really care for, and I didn't feel like it fit. The second thing is that this book, towards the end, has a trope in it that I do not like. So it is the kind of secret royalty trope, which is one that I'm not really that into. And this one, the main character, Shasta, turns out is the son of a member of Archenland royalty. And I did not really like that very much. I liked how he got mistaken for, I believe his name was Corin, when they were in Tashban, the big city. And I thought that was kind of interesting, seeing him interact with all these other characters, the Pevensies and all the other characters that we know and love. That was kind of fun, but other than that, I did not really like that aspect of the book. But there was a lot of stuff in this book that I did really enjoy, and pretty much up until the very ending, I loved this book, and then the ending kind of fell apart a little bit, basically. Next, number 4 is, once again, one that I wish I could have higher, and that is Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which I think was probably my favorite one as a kid as well. Now, what I really like about this one, well, there's several things. I really like the story of it. I think the characters are all pretty good, all that stuff. But I really enjoy the more adventurous feel that this book has. Not that the other Narnia books don't have that, because all of the Narnia books really have some sort of adventure that the characters go on. The only one that I can think of that maybe doesn't have that is probably The Last Battle. At least in my mind, it doesn't really have that feel to it. But this one has that, I think, more than any other, because These characters are traveling basically into uncharted territory. They're traveling the seas and visiting all these islands that are known about but haven't been seen in the books before, and then also going into these places that have not really been discovered, like Deathwater Island, which has water that if you put something into it, it turns to gold, or the island with the hopping people whose names I can't remember, and the magician, the one with the guy who used to be a star, whose name I also can't remember. All of this stuff. And all of these islands have something interesting and unique about them. And I just really loved that aspect of this book. And ultimately, I think this is the point where we transition into the books, in my opinion, being really great. Because I can't really think of a whole lot about this one that I don't really like. I can't really come up with any big negatives for this book. But I just like the other ones more. At number 3, we have one which would probably be a little higher for some people, but for me, I decided to put it at number 3. And again, it kind of hurts me a little, but I have the original Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Now, I did originally actually have this at my number 2 spot, but I decided to put it down because I didn't enjoy it as much as I did as a kid. I still enjoyed it a lot, but I decided to put it a little bit lower because even though I do have a huge amount of nostalgia for this book and for this story in general in the adaptations as well, I decided to put it at number 3. But, I mean, it's a classic, so I feel like if you don't have this pretty high, then something's a little wrong with you. I kid anyway, if you happen to not love this book that much, that's totally fine, but I do love this book. It's the classic Narnia story. It's just such a kind of cozy book for me. It's one of those stories that I can read or even watch the movie or anything like that, and it's just it brings me back to my childhood, and I just have a very nice time with it. I love the story, I love the characters, and all of that. Again, not really anything I can think of that I don't like. The only thing that I can really think of that I kind of came up with while I was reading it is I wish it was a little longer, because this is actually, I think, the shortest Narnia book. I wish there had been maybe a little bit more to it. Next up, I have my number 2, which I originally had at number 1, but I thought about it a little bit and I decided it was going to be my number 2. And this is one that really impressed me when I reread it, because I didn't really remember much of it when I went back to it, but I ended up really, really loving it. And that is The Silver Chair. I don't really know what the specific reasons are why I enjoyed this so much, but I just really, really loved reading this one. But one of the things that I do really like about this is seeing a different side of the world of Narnia, and that's, as I assume you have probably been able to tell, one of my big plus points with several of these books is seeing different parts of the world of Narnia, whether that's the islands in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, or the land of Calormen in The Horse and His Boy, or even a world that's not even Narnia in Charn in The Magician's Nephew. I just love visiting all of these different places and seeing what they're like. I especially found, I believe it's called the Underland, the underground kind of whole society and everything in this book. I found really interesting, and I kind of wish we had gotten more of that as well. I like the character of Puddleglum. He's a fun little side character that tags along with Eustace and Jill. I enjoyed also how this kind of built off of like Prince Caspian and stuff, with the main the guy they were going to rescue, whose name I can't remember, was his child and all that stuff, and seeing kind of what was going on with him. It's generally just, I really enjoyed this book. And again, can't really think of any negatives for it. It's just one that I really, really enjoyed. And that, of course, brings us to my number 1, which is Prince Caspian. This was a surprise for me, for a few reasons. First of all, in the few cases where I have seen other people rank the Narnia books, this is usually towards the bottom. Secondly, this was probably one of my least favorites as a kid. However, when I read it again this year, I really, really enjoyed it. And when I first read it, because I had always thought of like the Lion, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe probably being my favorite for various reasons, because I love it and nostalgia and all that stuff. And I read this and I was like, do I like this more? And as I thought about it, I figured, yeah, I think I do like this more. And there are several reasons for that. I just like the story of it. I like the character of Caspian. I like seeing the Pevensies again. I like seeing Narnia in such a different state from pretty much everywhere else in the books, especially coming off the line The Witch in the Wardrobe. It's a very different feel to it, which I really enjoyed, and in general, I just really liked everything about this book. Again, not really any negatives I can think of. I just enjoyed basically everything here. The characters, the story, the changes in the setting, all of that stuff. It was all just super interesting to me, and I really loved it. So that's pretty much all I got for you for this video. Let me know down in the comments what your ranking of the Narnia books is. And that is pretty much all I got for you today, so thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.